My name's Eva, and I grew up in what you might call an ordinary family. But let me tell you, there was nothing ordinary about how things played out. From the day I was born, I was the second fiddle in my parents' orchestra. My older brother, Tom, was their golden child, the apple of their eye. They had big dreams for him. He was going to take over our family's Chinese porcelain business and make it big. Me? I was just there. Tom got all the attention, all the praise, all the newest gadgets. Latest iPhone? Tom had it. Newest gaming console? Tom's. Cool party invitation? Tom's going. Me? I was lucky if I got Tom's hand-me-downs or a babysitter for the night. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate my parents or even Tom. I just didn't understand them. They were always trying to be something they weren't: richer, smarter, more important. It was all about appearances with them. Eva, stand up straight, Mom would hiss at family gatherings. And for goodness sake, smile. What will people think? I'd plaster on a fake smile and count the minutes until I could escape to my room. The only bright spot in all this was my grandparents, Mom's parents. They lived in a cozy little house across town, and visiting them was like stepping into another world. With them, I felt seen, loved. It was the only place I felt I could truly be myself. When Tom graduated high school, it was a big to-do. My parents threw a lavish party, invited all their important friends, and announced proudly that Tom would be attending some fancy-pants college they'd handpicked for him. Our boy's going places, Dad boasted, clapping Tom on the back. He'll make the family proud. Tom went to college, and I stayed at home. It's been a few years, and I researched schools, picked out a program I was passionate about. All I had to do was tell my parents. The next day, I gathered my courage and approached them at breakfast. Mom, Dad, I said, my voice shaking a little. I've decided on the college I want to attend. They looked at me like I'd grown a second head. College, Dad scoffed. You? Mom laughed, a high, fake sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, Eva, don't be silly. You don't need college, you'll work in the shop with us. But I want to study, I started, but Dad cut me off. We're not wasting money on your education, he said firmly. That money's going towards Tom's new car. I stood there, shocked into silence. Then Mom delivered the final blow. Face it, Eva, she said, not unkindly, but with a patronizing smile. You're just not college material, you'll be much happier in the shop. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All my dreams, all my hard work, meant nothing to them. I ran from the room, tears streaming down my face, and did the only thing I could think of. I called my grandparents. Tears streaming down my face, I could barely get the words out. Grandma, they said I'm not college material, I sobbed into the phone. There was a moment of silence, then Grandpa's voice came on the line, firm and angry. Pack your bags, Eva, we're coming to get you. An hour later, I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when my parents burst into my room. What do you think you're doing, Mom demanded. I'm leaving, I said, my voice shaky but determined. Dad scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Where would you go? Just then, the doorbell rang. I heard Grandpa's booming voice downstairs, and a wave of relief washed over me. She's coming with us, Grandpa said as he appeared in my doorway, Grandma right behind him. Now wait just a minute, Dad started, but Grandpa cut him off. Eva's 18. She can live wherever she damn well pleases, he growled, and right now she pleases to live with us. Mom tried to argue, but I was already hauling my suitcase down the stairs. As we drove away, I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. I thought I'd feel sad, but all I felt was free. That night, over a home-cooked dinner, my grandparents laid out their plan. We've been saving for years, Grandma said, reaching for my hand. We always knew you were destined for great things, Eva. We want to pay for your college. And just like that, my life changed. I enrolled in the college of my dreams, ready to tackle whatever came my way. Every month, without fail, a small amount of money would appear in my account for accommodation, the note always said. I threw myself into my studies with a passion I never knew I had. Late nights in the library, heated debates in class, projects that challenged me in ways I'd never been challenged before. I loved every minute of it. One day, after presenting a particularly difficult project, my professor pulled me aside. "Eva, I'm impressed," she said, a rare smile on her usually stern face. "How would you like to intern at Stellar Corp this summer?" My jaw dropped. Stellar Corp was the most prestigious company in the city. Everyone wanted to work there. Are you serious?" I stammered. She nodded. "I'm recommending you personally, don't let me down." I practically floated out of the classroom. Me, Eva, the girl who was not college material, landing an internship at Stellar Corp. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The future was wide open, and I was ready to grab it with both hands. I was in my 3rd year of college when the unexpected call came. My older brother Tom had already graduated and landed a job. He'd been bragging about some big promotion, and now my parents, who had hardly spoken to me in years, suddenly wanted me to come home to share in Tom's success. I spent the next few days debating whether to go. Part of me wanted to stay away, to protect the life I'd built for myself. But another part, well, maybe things had changed, maybe they finally saw me differently. In the end, I decided to go. What's the worst that could happen, right? I arrived at my old house on Friday evening, feeling like a stranger as I walked up the familiar driveway. Mom answered the door, all smiles and air kisses. I'd just finished unpacking when I heard the front door open, and Tom's voice drift up the stairs. "Mom, Dad, we're here." Curious, I headed downstairs. Tom was standing in the living room, his arm around a pretty blonde girl I'd never seen before. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah," Tom announced, beaming, "my fiancée." Mom let out a squeal that could have shattered glass, while Dad pumped Tom's hand enthusiastically. I stood on the sidelines, feeling like an outsider at a party I hadn't been invited to. "It's nice to meet you," I said to Sarah, who smiled warmly at me. "You must be Eva. Tom's told me so much about you." I doubted that, but I appreciated the effort. As we all sat down, the story came out. Tom and Sarah had been dating all through college, and now that they'd graduated, they'd decided to tie the knot. "So Sarah," Mom said, leaning forward eagerly, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" Sarah smiled. "Oh, they're in business. They own a chain of high-end boutiques across the country." I swear I could see dollar signs light up in my parents' eyes. Dad puffed up like a peacock. "Well, we're thrilled to welcome you to the family," he declared. "Now about the wedding. I think we should spare no expense. In fact, I'd be happy to cover half the cost myself." I nearly choked on my drink. Half the wedding costs? This from the man who wouldn't spend a dime on my college education. "That's very generous," Sarah said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "But really, there's no need." "Nonsense," Dad boomed. "We want this to be the event of the season. Nothing but the best for my son and his bride." I caught Tom's eye across the room. He looked embarrassed? Uncomfortable? It was hard to tell. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. As the evening wore on, the wedding plans grew more and more extravagant. A 5-star venue, gourmet catering, designer dresses. My parents were going all out to impress Sarah's family. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Groaning, I dragged myself out of bed and crept down the stairs, curious about what new drama was unfolding. Tom and Sarah were standing in the living room, a sleek folder in Sarah's hands. My parents sat on the couch, looking confused. "What do you mean?" another city dad was saying, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Sarah opened the folder, revealing glossy photos of a stunning beach resort. "We've always dreamed of a destination wedding," she explained, her voice excited. "Look at this place, it's perfect." I watched as my father's eyes bulged at the price list Sarah handed him. This is ridiculous," he spluttered. "It's 3 times what we discussed." "But Dad," Tom argued, "you said you wanted the best. This is the best." Dad stood up, his fists clenched. "I meant the best in our hometown, where our friends can attend. Who's going to travel across the country for your wedding?" Our friends will, Sarah said softly, looking hurt. The argument escalated quickly. Dad insisted on a local wedding, while Tom and Sarah stood their ground on the destination plan. I stood in the corner, feeling like I was watching a tennis match, my head swiveling back and forth between the two sides. Finally, Dad exploded. Enough. It's either a wedding here the way I want it, or you're on your own. The room fell silent. Tom's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before. Fine, he said coldly, we'll do it on our own. With that, he grabbed Sarah's hand and stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Dad collapsed onto the couch, his face in his hands. Mom fluttered around him, murmuring soothing words. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. I'm going to head back to college, I said quietly. Neither of them responded. I packed my bags and left, grateful to escape the tension-filled house. Back at college, I threw myself into my studies, trying to forget the family drama. Weeks turned into months and life went on. I was deep into my final project when I got the call that changed everything. Is this Eva Thompson? A formal voice asked. Yes, that's me, I replied, my heart racing. This is Mr. Johnson from Johnson Associates law firm. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your grandparents, Robert and Margaret Thompson, were in a car accident 3 days ago. I'm sorry to inform you that they didn't survive. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My grandparents. Gone? It couldn't be true. They were the only ones who had ever truly believed in me, supported me. And now... Miss Thompson, the lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. There's something else we need to discuss. Your grandparents will. I listened in a daze as Mr. Johnson explained that I was the sole beneficiary. My grandparents had left me everything, their cozy house, their savings, everything. I sat on my bed after the call ended, trying to process it all. Grief for my grandparents warred with disbelief over my inheritance. I was now the owner of a house and had a substantial amount of money in the bank. The dust had barely settled on my grandparents' funeral when the vultures started circling. I was still trying to process my grief when Tom showed up at my door, all smiles and fraternal love. Eva, sis, he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt about as genuine as a $3 bill. How you holding up? I stepped back, eyeing him warily. I'm managing. What are you doing here, Tom? He sauntered into my apartment like he owned the place, making himself comfortable on my couch. Well, I heard about Grandma and Grandpa's will. That's quite a windfall you got there, huh? And there it was. I crossed my arms, already knowing where this was heading. Look, Eva, Tom said, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew all too well. Sarah and I, we're still trying to put together our dream wedding, and now that you've come into some money. I cut him off. No, Tom, I'm not paying for your wedding. His face fell, then hardened. Come on, Eva. Don't be selfish. It's not like you earned that money. We all know you were just sucking up to them to get their money. The accusation hit me like a slap in the face. How dare you, I hissed. I loved them. They were the only ones who ever believed in me. Yeah, because you played them like a fiddle. Tom was on his feet now, shouting, Poor little Eva, so neglected. Give me a break. At least I'm not a spoiled brat who thinks the world owes him a fancy wedding, I shot back. We went back and forth, hurling accusations and old grievances at each other. Years of resentment and hurt came pouring out. By the time Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I was shaking with anger and hurt. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, my phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently my parents had been busy. How could you be so selfish, Eva? Your poor brother just wants a nice wedding. I always knew you were trouble. The messages went on and on. I called my parents, demanding an explanation. Well, what did you expect? Mom sniffed, refusing to help your own brother. It's shameful. You didn't want to pay for his ridiculous wedding either, I reminded her. That's different, Dad chimed in. We're his parents. You're just being greedy with your inheritance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Greedy? I worked my ass off in college while you two showered Tom with everything he wanted. Watch your language, young lady, Mom scolded. This is exactly why we always preferred Tom. He knows how to behave in polite society. Over the next few weeks, the family divide grew wider. Invitations to family events stopped coming. My cousins unfriended me on social media. It was like I'd been erased from the family tree overnight. At first it hurt. A lot. But as the days went by, I started to feel relieved. No more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, no more feeling like the family disappointment. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. I had 1 semester left, and I was determined to graduate with honors. My grandparents had believed in me, had given me this amazing gift. I wasn't about to let them down. The day I graduated from college should have been one of the happiest of my life. Instead, I felt empty. There was no one in the audience cheering for me, no proud parents taking photos, no celebratory dinner afterwards. I collected my diploma and went home alone. The next few weeks were a blur of job applications and interviews. I was determined to make something of myself, to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was worth something. Then, out of the blue, my phone buzzed with a message from Tom. I nearly dropped it in shock. Hey Eva, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm getting married next month. It would mean a lot if you could come. Call me. I stared at the message for a long time before finally hitting the call button. Eva, Tom's voice was hesitant. Thanks for calling. Look, I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you, how we all treated you. I was a spoiled brat, and I'm sorry. I was stunned into silence. You're my sister, Eva, he continued. You and our whole family, you're important to me. I want everyone there for my big day. Please say you'll come. I felt a lump in my throat. I'll think about it, I managed to say before hanging up. The day of the wedding arrived, and I found myself standing outside an elegant hotel, clutching an expensive gift and feeling like I was about to walk into the lion's den. The venue was stunning. Flowers everywhere, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. For a moment I felt underdressed in my simple cocktail dress. I spotted Tom across the room, looking dashing in his tuxedo. Taking a deep breath, I made my way over to him. Congratulations, I said, forcing a smile. Tom's face lit up. Eva, you came. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment I let myself believe that everything might be okay. We chatted for a few minutes and I started to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Then I saw them. Mom and Dad, making their grand entrance. Mom was dripping in jewelry, Dad in a tux that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. They swept into the room like royalty, greeting guests with air kisses and condescending smiles. Oh darling, my son's wedding is just divine, I overheard Mom saying to another guest. Of course we spared no expense. Only the best for our Tom. I had to stifle a laugh. Same old Mom and Dad, always putting on a show. As the evening wore on, I did my best to avoid them, sticking to the edges of the room and making small talk with distant relatives who didn't seem to remember our falling out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way Mom kept glancing at me, the hushed conversations that stopped when I walked by. It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The evening was in full swing when Dad clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. It's time for the family toast, he announced, beaming with pride. My stomach dropped. I hadn't prepared anything, but before I could protest, Mom was dragging me towards the stage. I stumbled after my parents, feeling like a lamb being led to slaughter. Dad started the speech, his voice thick with emotion. Tom, Sarah, we couldn't be prouder. Your love is an inspiration to us all. Mom chimed in. We've always been a close-knit family, supporting each other through thick and thin. I stood there, trying to keep a neutral expression, wondering what alternate reality they were living in. Then Dad dropped the bomb. In fact, we love Tom so much that we took out a substantial loan to pay for this beautiful wedding. Wait, what? I thought they'd refuse to pay for the destination wedding. But Dad wasn't finished. Of course we won't be paying back that loan ourselves. No, our wonderful daughter Eva has generously offered to cover it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I felt all the blood drain from my face as every eye in the room turned to me. What? I stammered, my voice echoing through the microphone. There must be some mistake. I never agreed to that. Mom's hand clamped down on my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Smile and agree, dear, she hissed through clenched teeth. But I was done playing along. I wrenched my arm free and stepped up to the microphone. I'm sorry, but this is the first I'm hearing about any loan. I never agreed to pay for Tom's wedding. The room erupted into shocked whispers. I saw Tom and Sarah exchanging panicked glances. Eva, darling, Mom said, her voice sickly sweet as she tried to salvage the situation. Don't be modest. We all know how generous you are with your inheritance. That was the last straw. Generous? You mean the inheritance you all tried to guilt me out of? The one you said I didn't deserve. Dad tried to grab the microphone, but I held on tight. I'm sorry, but I won't be paying for this wedding. I wasn't even consulted about it. You ungrateful little bastard, Dad snarled, forgetting the microphone was still on. His words echoed through the ballroom, causing several guests to gasp. Mom's carefully cultivated mask of politeness crumbled. We should have thrown you out on the street years ago. You're worthless, you hear me? Worthless. I stood there, shock and hurt warring inside me. Then, a calm settled over me. Without another word, I handed the microphone to the wide-eyed DJ and walked off the stage. As I made my way through the stunned crowd, I heard my parents' voices behind me, alternating between apologies to the guests and more insults hurled at my back. I made it to my car before the tears started. As I drove home, my phone exploded with messages, some supportive, most accusatory. I blocked them all. At home, I double-locked the door and sank to the floor, my mind reeling. Had this all been a setup? Had Tom's apology just been a ploy to get me to pay for his wedding? I felt sick, betrayed, angry, but underneath it all, there was a small spark of relief. The mask had finally come off. There was no more pretending, no more hoping for a family that clearly didn't want me. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were puffy from crying, and my head pounded with the mother of all headaches. I was contemplating spending the entire day in bed when there was a knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, looking as rough as I felt. Eva, please, he called through the door. I've been trying to reach you all night. Can we talk? Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell, but curiosity won out. I opened the door a crack, eyeing him warily. What do you want, Tom? He held up his hands in surrender, to apologize, and explain. Please, can I come in? Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat at my small kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us like a peace offering. I swear to you, Eva, I had no idea about Mom and Dad's plan, Tom began, his voice thick with emotion. When you stormed out, I confronted them. It was ugly. I snorted. Yeah, I bet. No, you don't understand, Tom insisted. Sarah and I, we never asked them for money. We were paying for the wedding ourselves. This whole loan thing, it was all their idea. They wanted to look good in front of Sarah's family. I felt a weight lift off my chest. So you didn't set you up? God, no, Eva. I meant what I said before the wedding. I want to make things right between us. As Tom talked, I saw a side of him I'd never seen before. He told me about how Sarah had opened his eyes to how dysfunctional our family was, how her parents treated their children with love and respect, not as pawns in some social climbing game. Sarah's parents are loaded, Tom said with a wry smile. But you'd never know it. They're the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. When they heard what happened, they offered to pay off Mom and Dad's loan. What? No, they can't do that, I protested. Tom held up a hand. Don't worry, I'm going to pay them back, every cent. But they wanted to do this for us, to give us a chance to start fresh without Mom and Dad's drama hanging over our heads. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but for once they weren't tears of frustration or anger. So what now, I asked. Tom reached across the table and took my hand. Now we start over. As a real family. Sarah and I want you in our lives, Eva. No strings attached. We talked for hours, really talked, for what felt like the first time in our lives. By the time Tom left, I felt like I'd gotten my brother back. The next few months were a whirlwind. I landed a job at a marketing firm, throwing myself into work with a passion I never knew I had. Tom and Sarah became regular fixtures in my life, dropping by for dinner or movie nights. One sunny afternoon, Tom and Sarah showed up at my door with matching grins. "We have news," Sarah said, practically bouncing with excitement. "You're going to be an aunt." I squealed and pulled them both into a hug. As we celebrated, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Our parents tried to worm their way back into our lives when they heard about the baby, but Tom and I stood firm. We were done with their manipulation and drama. It wasn't easy, cutting them out, but we had each other now. And sometimes, the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. I'm Natalie, 27 years old, and I'm getting married in a few weeks. Right now, I'm sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of wedding invitations. My eyes scan the names, making sure I haven't forgotten anyone important. But there's one name I deliberately left off the list: my stepmother's. I know what you're thinking. How could I not invite my stepmother to my own wedding? Well, it's a long story, and I guess now's as good a time as any to tell it. It all started when I was 5 years old. My parents split up, and my whole world turned upside down. They told me I'd be living with both of them, switching back and forth. At the time, I thought it was great. I loved both my parents and couldn't choose between them. This way, I didn't have to. Life after the divorce wasn't so bad at first. When I was with my dad, we'd go on these amazing road trips. He owned his own business, so he could take time off whenever it was his turn to have me. We'd hop in his car and explore different cities. I remember feeling like a little explorer, discovering new places with my dad by my side. When I was with my mom, things were different but just as good. We'd spend hours playing with my dolls, making up stories for each one, and the smell of fresh-baked cookies often filled the house. Those were happy times. I felt loved, wanted, and cherished by both my parents. But then, things changed. My dad got remarried when I was 7. I remember the day he introduced me to Sarah, my soon-to-be stepmother. She was pretty, with long blonde hair and a smile that seemed to light up the room. At first, things were okay. Sarah was nice to me, and she seemed to genuinely care. She'd help me with my homework when I was at Dad's house and even taught me how to braid my hair. But as time went on, something shifted. Sarah wanted kids of her own, but she couldn't get pregnant. I didn't understand it at the time, but looking back now, I can see how it affected her. Sarah's attitude towards me did a complete 180. Where once she'd been kind and welcoming, now she seemed to resent my very existence. It was like she hated me for being born when she couldn't have children of her own. I didn't understand it then. I was just a kid, wondering what I'd done wrong to make my stepmother suddenly dislike me so much. As time went on, Sarah's attitude towards me only got worse. It was like she'd made a decision: if she couldn't have kids of her own, she'd live for herself. And in that life, there was no room for me. I started noticing changes when I'd come back from my mom's. Dad and Sarah would be tanned and relaxed, full of stories about trips they'd taken while I was gone. One day, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Dad, why don't we go on trips like we used to?" He looked uncomfortable, glancing at Sarah before answering. "Well, sweetie, things are different now. We have to consider Sarah's schedule too." Sarah cut in, her voice sharp. "Natalie, you're old enough to understand that adults need their own time. Don't be selfish." I felt like I'd been slapped. Selfish? For wanting to spend time with my own father? But it wasn't just the trips. When I was at Dad's house, everything changed. Sarah had new rules for me, and they all seemed designed to keep me out of sight and out of mind. "Natalie," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "why don't you go play in your room? Adults are talking." At first, I tried to argue, "But I want to be out here with you and Dad." Sarah's eyes would narrow. "Your father and I need some peace and quiet. Is that too much to ask?" So I'd retreat to my room, feeling more like a prisoner than a daughter in my own father's house. The list of Don Ts grew longer by the day. Don't make noise. Don't talk loudly. Don't play active games. Don't laugh too loud. It was like living in a library, but worse. One afternoon I was in the living room, laughing at a funny TV show. Sarah stormed in, face red with anger. "What did I tell you about being quiet?" she snapped. "But I was just laughing at." She cut me off. "I don't care what you were laughing at. In this house you follow my rules. Understand?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "Yes, Sarah." "Good," she said, turning to leave. "Now go to your room and stay there until dinner." Dad seemed oblivious to it all. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how Sarah was treating me, he'd brush it off. "She's just adjusting, Natalie," he'd say. "Give her time." But time didn't make things better. It only made Sarah more bold in her dislike of me. She'd criticize everything I did, from how I dressed to how I ate. "Honestly, Natalie, can't you sit up straight and chew with your mouth closed? It's like you were raised in a barn." I wanted to scream, to tell her that I was just a kid, that I was trying my best, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. In Sarah's eyes, my very existence was an offense. So I learned to make myself small, to be quiet, to stay out of the way. I became a ghost in my father's house, tiptoeing around, afraid to make a sound or draw attention to myself. Every 2 weeks, when it was time to go back to Mom's, I felt like I could breathe again. But the dread of returning to Dad's house, to Sarah's cold stares and harsh words, always loomed over me. I managed to keep my emotions bottled up for years, but by the time I turned 12, I couldn't take it anymore. One day, after a particularly nasty encounter with Sarah, I broke down and told Mom everything. Mom listened, her face growing darker with each word. When I finished, she exploded. That thing, she yelled, making me jump. How dare she treat my daughter like this? Before I could stop her, Mom was on the phone with Dad. I've never heard her so angry. "Listen here, you spineless excuse for a father," she snarled into the phone. "If you don't get your wife under control, I swear I'll take you to court and make sure you never see Natalie again." I felt sick. This wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted things to get better, not worse. A few days later, when I went back to Dad's house, he sat me down for a serious talk. "Natalie," he began, his voice stern. "We need to discuss your behavior. Sarah has been nothing but good to you. She's trying her best to be a good stepmother, and all you do is complain." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But Dad, she..." "Enough," he snapped. "Do you realize what you've done? Your mother is threatening to take away my visitation rights. Do you want that? Do you want to never see me again?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "No, of course not." Dad's voice softened a bit. "Then you need to stop this, Natalie. No more complaints about Sarah. She only wants what's best for you. If you keep this up, you'll end up tearing this family apart. Is that what you want?" I shook my head, unable to speak through my tears. As he left the room, I felt like my world had shattered. Not only had Dad not believed me, but he'd also made me feel like everything was my fault. I was the problem, not Sarah. From that day on, I stopped complaining. I decided to be the perfect stepdaughter, to do everything Sarah wanted, just so I wouldn't lose my dad. I became a shadow in the house, quiet and obedient. I had no say in anything, but at least I still got to see my father, even if he seemed more like a stranger with each passing day. Life at Mom's house was a different story. A few years after the divorce from Dad, Mom met Robert. He was kind, funny, and had a daughter of his own, Lily, who was a year younger than me. Over time, I fell in love with both of them. Robert never tried to replace my dad, but he was always there for me. He'd help me with my homework, listen to my problems, and even taught me how to ride a bike, something Dad had always been too busy to do. Lily became the sister I never knew I wanted. We'd stay up late, giggling and sharing secrets. She never made me feel like an outsider. As I got older, the contrast between my two homes became starker. At Dad's, I was a ghost, trying not to upset the delicate balance. At Mom's, I was Natalie, loud, funny, and loved. As I entered my teenage years, my needs naturally grew. Like any kid my age, I wanted the latest gadgets, a cool smartphone, a decent laptop for schoolwork. Dad, to his credit, seemed to understand this. He'd always been generous, and at first he didn't hesitate to buy me what I needed. I remember the day he handed me my first smartphone. But my joy was short-lived. Sarah's disapproving frown said it all. Later that night, I overheard them arguing. "You're spoiling her," Tom Sarah hissed. "Do you have any idea how much that phone cost?" "She needs it for school," Dad defended weakly. Sarah scoffed. "Please. She needs it to post selfies and waste time on social media. You're throwing money away." From that day on, Sarah appointed herself as the family's financial guardian. She told Dad she'd help him save money when it came to my expenses. What this really meant was that she'd take control of everything I got. The next time I needed new clothes, Sarah insisted on handling it herself. What followed was a parade of secondhand clothes and shoes, all bought from discount websites or clearance sales. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against secondhand stuff, but Sarah took it to an extreme. More often than not, the clothes were ill-fitting, out of style, or just plain uncomfortable. But I didn't dare complain. I still remembered Dad's warning about tearing the family apart. The irony of it all, while I was forced to wear hand-me-downs, Sarah never skimped on herself. Her closet was a fashion magazine come-to-life, designer shoes, branded bags, clothes from the latest collections. She'd spend hours preening in front of the mirror, adjusting her perfectly coordinated outfits. Things came to a head when I graduated high school. Dad had promised me a car, nothing fancy, just something to get me around. I was over the moon. Finally, a sign that he still cared, that he saw me as more than just an inconvenience in his new life. But Sarah, true to form, couldn't let it happen. The night before we were supposed to go car shopping, all hell broke loose. "A car?" Sarah shrieked. "Are you out of your mind, Tom? We can't afford it. Besides, I need a new car. Mine is almost 3 years old." I listened from my room, heart sinking with every word. I knew how this would end. Sure enough, the next morning, Dad came to me with that look on his face, the one that said he was about to disappoint me again. "Natalie, honey," he began, not meeting my eyes. "About the car." I saved him the trouble. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. We can't afford it, right?" He looked relieved that he didn't have to say it himself.
Right.
"But hey, I promise I'll pay for any college you want to go to, and your accommodation too. How's that sound?" I forced a smile. "Sounds great, Dad. Thanks." As he left my room, I heard Sarah's voice from downstairs. "Tom, dear, when are we going to look at that new Jeep I wanted?" So I sat there, in my room full of ill-fitting clothes, clutching my outdated phone, dreaming of a car I'd never get. And I realized something: the material things weren't what hurt the most. It was what they represented. Every second-hand shirt, every denied request, every broken promise was just another way of saying, "You're not worth it, Natalie." When it came time to choose a college, I poured my heart into researching the best options. I finally found one that seemed perfect: great program, beautiful campus, and not too far from home. I was ecstatic when I got accepted. But as soon as Sarah saw the tuition fees, all hell broke loose. "Are you kidding me?" she screeched, face turning red. "This is highway robbery." Dad tried to calm her down. "Now, Sarah, we did promise Natalie." "I don't care what we promised," Sarah interrupted, practically foaming at the mouth. "We are not paying this much for her to party for 4 years. She stormed off and returned with a handful of brochures. Here she thrust them at Dad. "These colleges are much more reasonable, and they're farther away. It'll teach her some independence." And just like that, my dreams were crushed again. I ended up at Sarah's choice of college, cheaper, yes, but also far from everything and everyone I knew. Mom and Robert were thrilled when they heard I was going to college. They didn't know about the behind-the-scenes drama, and I didn't have the heart to tell them. Why burden them with my problems? Despite everything, I threw myself into my studies. I was determined to make the most of this opportunity, even if it wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for. I'd come home for holidays, splitting my time between Mom's welcoming house and Dad's. Well, Dad's house. It was during one of these breaks that everything finally came to a head. Sarah was having a birthday party, and to my surprise, Dad called and asked me to come. "Sarah would love to see you," he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I was skeptical, but a small part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, things were changing. So I agreed. I even bought Sarah a gift, a nice scarf I'd saved up for from my part-time job at college. When I arrived at the house, the party was in full swing. I took a deep breath and approached Sarah, gift in hand. "Happy birthday, Sarah," I said, forcing a smile. "I hope you like." I never got to finish. Sarah's face contorted with rage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I stammered, confused. "But Dad said you wanted me to come." "Get out," she shrieked. "You're not welcome here. How dare you show up and ruin my party?" I stood there, frozen in shock. The room had gone silent, all eyes on us. Sarah snatched the gift from my hands and, without even looking at it, tossed it in a nearby trash can. "I don't want anything from you. You're not worthy to be here among my friends. Leave. Now." Tears stung my eyes as I turned and fled. I ran up to my old room, grabbing the few belongings I'd left there over the years. As I reached for the front door, I heard Sarah's laughter floating from the living room, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just publicly humiliated her stepdaughter and thrown away a heartfelt gift. I slammed the door behind me and walked away from that house for what I promised myself would be the last time. I went straight to Mom's, where I broke down and finally told her everything, all the years of mistreatment, the manipulation, the broken promises. Mom was furious, but more than that, she was heartbroken for me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, holding me close. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry you went through all that alone." As I cried in my mother's arms, I felt a weird mix of sadness and relief. Sad for the relationship with my father that I'd probably never have, but relieved to finally be free from Sarah's toxic presence. The day after Sarah's birthday disaster, my phone rang. It was Dad. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me still hoped he'd apologize, that he'd finally see the truth. "Natalie," he said, his voice stern, "why did you leave Sarah's party so abruptly? She was quite upset." My blood boiled. "That's not what happened." She yelled at me in front of everyone and threw my gift in the trash. She kicked me out. There was a pause, then Dad's voice came back, cold and angry. "I can't believe you'd make up such lies about Sarah. Why are you trying to denigrate my wife? Call me when you're ready to apologize to Sarah." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears streaming down my face. That was the moment I realized I'd truly lost my father. The next few years were a blur. I threw myself into my studies, graduated college with honors, and landed a decent job. I saw Dad a handful of times, always on neutral ground, a cafe, a park, never at his house. About a year after graduation, I met Jason at work. He was a few years older, kind, funny, and most importantly, he really saw me, not as an inconvenience or a burden, but as a person worthy of love and respect. 4 years flew by. Jason and I moved in together, adopted a cat named Muffin, and built a life filled with love and laughter. Then, on a random Tuesday evening as we were doing dishes after dinner, Jason turned to me and proposed. And just like that, I was engaged. As the initial excitement settled, the reality of wedding planning set in. Which brings us back to where this story began, me, surrounded by wedding invitations, grappling with the question of whether to invite Sarah. In the end, I decided to send an invitation to Dad alone. I couldn't bring myself to include Sarah, not after everything that had happened. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I was starting a new chapter in my life, and I wanted it to be free from the shadows of the past. A week after I sent out the invitations, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered, expecting the usual awkward small talk. Instead, I got an earful of fury. "How dare you," he bellowed, not even bothering with a hello. "How could you disrespect Sarah like this? You invited me to your wedding but not her, after everything she's done for you." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh that seemed to shock Dad into silence. Everything she's done for me, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Dad, are you hearing yourself right now? She raised you for years, he shot back. She put so much love and care into. Love and care, I interrupted, my calm finally snapping. When, Dad? When did she ever show me love or care? Was it when she made me wear second-hand clothes while she bought designer outfits? Or when she convinced you not to buy me a car for college? Oh, I know it must have been when she threw my birthday gift in the trash and kicked me out of her party. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a quieter voice, Dad said, Natalie, I'm sure you're exaggerating. Sarah wouldn't. Wouldn't what, Dad? Wouldn't treat me like crap for years? Wouldn't make me feel unwelcome in my own home? Wouldn't consistently prioritize her own wants over my needs? Because she did all of that and you let her. My voice was shaking now, years of pent-up hurt and anger pouring out. You never stood up for me, Dad, not once. You always took her side, always believed her over me. Do you have any idea how that felt? To know that your own father would always choose his wife over you. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was different. Smaller somehow. Natalie, I had no idea. I never meant to. Oh God, what have I done? I heard a choked sob from his end, and despite everything, my heart clenched. I'm so sorry, Pumpkin, he continued, his voice thick with tears. I've been a terrible father. I put Sarah first, I ignored your feelings, I failed you. Can you ever forgive me? I felt my own eyes welling up. This was all I'd wanted to hear for years, but now that the moment was here, I didn't know how to react. I hesitated, torn between hope and caution. I'll think about it, Dad. That's all I can promise right now. We ended the call soon after, both emotionally drained. Over the next few weeks, Dad made a real effort. He called regularly, asked about the wedding plans, even offered to help with the costs. Slowly, cautiously, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Then, the day before the wedding, my phone rang again. It was Dad, and my stomach dropped at the sound of his voice. Natalie, his voice hard. It's Sarah, she had a heart attack. This is your fault. If you hadn't excluded her, if you hadn't stressed her out like this, I can't believe you'd do this to her. I won't be at your celebration. I hope you're happy. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. All the progress, all the hope I'd allowed myself to feel gone in an instant. As I cried in my fiancé's arms, I couldn't help but think, was this really it? Was this how my relationship with my father would end? On the eve of what should be the happiest day of my life. The morning I woke up with a mix of emotions, excitement for the day ahead, but also a lingering sadness about Dad's absence. As I sipped my coffee, trying to focus on the positive, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Sarah's social media page. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on it. What I saw made my blood boil. There was Sarah, looking perfectly healthy, posting dramatic status updates about how hurt she was, how ungrateful I was, how she was recovering from a terrible shock. But in her photos, she was smiling, looking as put together as ever. As I scrolled through the posts, my phone rang. It was Carol, one of Sarah's old friends from the neighborhood. Natalie, it's Carol. Look, I shouldn't be calling you, but you need to know something. Sarah. She faked the heart attack. I overheard her bragging about it to some friends. She did it to make sure your dad wouldn't come to your wedding. I'm so sorry, honey. I thanked Carol and hung up, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to call Dad immediately to expose Sarah's lies, but then I stopped. What would be the point? He'd made his choice, time and time again. He'd chosen Sarah over me, believed her lies, let her mistreat me for years. This was just the final nail in the coffin. As I got ready for the wedding, surrounded by my mom, my stepsister Lily, and my bridesmaids, I pushed thoughts of Dad and Sarah out of my mind. This was my day, and I refused to let them ruin it. But there was still one problem. Who's going to walk me down the aisle, I asked, my voice small. Mom and Lily exchanged glances, then Mom spoke up, honey, Robert would be honored to do it, if you'd like. He loves you like his own daughter, you know. I felt a lump in my throat. Robert, my stepdad, who'd been more of a father to me in many ways than my own dad. Who'd always supported me, always made me feel welcome and loved. Really, I asked, looking at Robert. He smiled warmly. Nothing would make me prouder, Natalie, but only if that's what you want. In that moment, I realized something important. Family isn't just about blood, it's about love, support, and being there for each other. Robert had been that for me, consistently for years. I'd love that, Robert. Thank you, I said, giving him a hug. The wedding was beautiful. As Robert walked me down the aisle, I saw Jason waiting for me, his face lit up with love. I saw my mom, Lily, and all our friends and family smiling and crying happy tears. In that moment, I knew I had all the family I needed right here. A few days after the wedding, as Jason and I were preparing to leave for our honeymoon, I decided to post some wedding photos online. Almost immediately, a nasty comment appeared under one of the pictures. Look at that, Sarah's comment read. Being walked down the aisle by a stranger while her own father wasn't even invited. Shameful. I stared at the comment, a familiar anger bubbling up inside me. But then I felt Jason's hand on my shoulder. You okay, Nat? He asked, concern in his eyes. I looked at my husband, then back at the phone. Suddenly, Sarah's words seemed small, petty, and utterly unimportant. You know what? I am okay, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. In fact, I'm better than okay. Without another thought, I blocked Sarah's account. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I blocked Dad's too. It was time to close that chapter of my life for good.